The Rise of the Cooperative Force, Part 1, The Calculated Return. Elena Vance had spent 2 years perfecting the art of being invisible. Chicago was the ideal city for this trade, vast, gray, and indifferent. Here, she was merely Elena Vance, a meticulous administrative assistant in a mid-sized, unremarkable legal firm, living in a functional, forgettable apartment building in Lincoln Park. The high-thread count sheets, the custom-made suits, the endless stream of foreign cash, and the cold, diamond-hard scrutiny of her previous life were replaced by sensible wool coats, shared laundry rooms, and the soft, innocent surveillance of her 2-year-old son, Elias. Elias was her masterpiece and her most dangerous secret. He was Marcus Thorne's son, a fact that had necessitated this entire, excruciating existence in the shadows. Marcus, the Miami magnate whose legitimate business fronts were built on a foundation of severe, illicit global financing, the Thorne Syndicate, had made his feelings clear about heirs. A bloodline is a blueprint for betrayal, Elena. A son is just an expensive target in this game. His words, delivered with chilling come-over-chilled champagne, had been the only permission she needed to disappear when their marriage collapsed. Her current life was defined by routine and paranoia. Every transaction was in cash, every route to daycare varied, and every unfamiliar car on the street was logged and scrutinized. Her sharp legal mind, once dedicated to finding loopholes in international financial regulation for the Syndicate, was now obsessively focused on maintaining her facade. It was a life built on a single, unwavering promise: protect Elias from the shadow his father cast. But invisibility, she was about to discover, was no shield against genetics. It started subtly, with a persistent cough Elena dismissed as a Chicago winter ailment. Then came the fever, spiking violently and resisting every pediatric remedy she attempted. On a brutally cold Tuesday night, with Elias burning hot and struggling for breath, Elena's carefully constructed cum shattered. She drove to a nearby community hospital, choosing one intentionally far from any of Marcus's known interests or surveillance routes. For 3 days, she waited in agonizing suspense as doctors ran tests, each one coming back inconclusive until the final, specialized genetic screening arrived. Dr. Chen, a kind but weary specialist, sat across from her, the sterile white of the room amplifying the horror of his words. "Mrs. Vane," he began, resting his hands on the manila folder. "Elias has a condition we believe is a form of hereditary angioedema, but it's presenting with a highly unusual, almost unique cellular pathology. It's an ultra-rare syndrome, genetic, clearly dominant, and aggressive." Elena, the woman who had once stood toe-to-toe with Swiss bankers and Russian financiers without flinching, felt the room tilt. "What does that mean, doctor?" she asked, her voice dangerously steady. "It means his body is attacking its own vascular system. His immune response is critically compromised, and his clotting factors are irregular. Without intervention, we're looking at a severe prognosis. Standard treatments will only manage symptoms, they won't cure it." He slid a document toward her, detailing the specific, complex gene therapy required. This therapy, the specific vector required for his unique mutation, is experimental. It's not available in any public database or standard pharmaceutical pipeline. I've cross-referenced his markers with global clinical trials. It's associated with only one private research network, an organization called Aetheria Medical Dynamics. They operate exclusively under non-disclosure agreements, usually for individuals requiring extreme privacy and resources. Aetheria Medical Dynamics. Elena had drafted the initial corporate charters for Aetheria 5 years ago. It was Marcus's pet project, a bespoke, untraceable medical shadow network designed to treat the ailments of the world's most powerful, and most criminal, elite, including, she now realized with a cold certainty, his own family line. Marcus had once casually mentioned the Thorne lineage carried certain markers that required proactive management. She hadn't understood the depth of that comment until this very moment. The diagnosis was a death sentence for her autonomy. The only cure for Elias lay behind the fortified walls of the very man she had spent 2 years running from. Her choice was start, remain invisible and watch her son die, or sacrifice her freedom and risk exposure to Marcus's world of violence and control to save him. The decision took less than an hour. By dawn, she had liquidated the small, remaining slush fund she'd maintained, packed a single duffel bag containing Elias's essentials, and purchased a first-class, one-way ticket to Miami. She knew better than to arrive looking destitute. Marcus respected only strength, and she needed to enter his domain not as a supplicant, but as a negotiator offering a terrifying truth. The flight was a blur of calculated moves. She called the shell phone number she knew Marcus maintained, a line reserved for only the most severe, untraceable crises. It rang twice before a deep, resonant voice answered. "Speak." The voice was Marcus's, sharper and colder than she remembered. Elena took a steadying breath, the scent of antiseptic from the hospital still faintly clinging to her coat. "Marcus." "It's Elena." Silence stretched across the country, thick and instantaneous. She could almost feel the kinetic shift in his environment, the way every muscle in his frame would have gone taut, assessing the threat. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why your voice is in my ear, Elena," he said, his tone devoid of surprise, laced only with lethal impatience. "Or I will assume this is a misplaced assassination attempt and act accordingly. I'm in Miami. I'm at the private airfield, signature flight support. And I have something of yours. Something you never knew existed." She kept the information sparse, a hook to draw him in, an enigma to prevent a remote execution. "You have nothing of mine, except perhaps a collection of my past legal indiscretions. None of which carry weight now. It's not paper, Marcus. It's blood." She paused, letting the word sink in. "It's Elias. He's 2 years old. And he carries the Thorne markers. He's sick. Aetheria Medical Dynamics is the only option." The silence this time was different. It held disbelief, then a terrible, building storm of comprehension. Marcus didn't curse or yell. He simply terminated the call. 20 minutes later, a sleek, obsidian Mercedes-Benz, flanked by 2 identical black SUVs filled with armed security personnel, pulled onto the tarmac. The lead SUV was driven by Hector, Marcus's chief of security, a man Elena knew possessed the tactical skill of a marine and the loyalty of a fanatic. Marcus did not exit the car. He waited, his silhouette a solid, imposing shape behind the tinted glass. Elena approached the Mercedes, Elias leaping fitfully in her arms, his small face flushed with fever. She tapped lightly on the passenger window. It slid down silently. Marcus Thorne looked exactly as she remembered, only sharper, honed to a finer edge of danger. His dark hair was meticulously styled, his charcoal suit perfect, and his eyes, the same shade of cold, clear amber, locked onto the child in her arms with an intensity that took her breath away. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus Thorne was speechless. Elena stepped back, allowing him a full, unobstructed view of the child. "He needs Aetheria, Marcus. Now." His gaze finally lifted to hers, a terrifying blend of possessive rage and immediate paternal devotion flickering in his depths. He opened the passenger door, a subtle, deliberate movement. "Get in, Elena," he commanded, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that promised both salvation and damnation. "You will tell me everything, starting with why you chose to keep my son alive, knowing the consequences." She settled into the leather seat beside him, the scent of his expensive cologne and the latent threat radiating from him instantly familiar. Elias stirred, leaning into her shoulder. "I kept him alive because he is mine," she replied, meeting his amber eyes without blinking. And I brought him here because he is yours, and only you have the keys to his survival. The drive from the airfield to Marcus's fortress, the Citadel, was silent, the tension in the car a physical weight. The Citadel was an architectural statement of power, a minimalist, towering structure of steel and glass overlooking the Atlantic, surrounded by layers of biometric and armed security that made it practically impenetrable. It wasn't a home, it was a compound. Upon arrival, Marcus issued his terms without preamble while a team of Aetheria physicians was already swarming Elias. He stays, Marcus stated, watching the doctors with an hawk-like focus. His treatment is non-negotiable. Full access, full control. And you, he turned to Elena, his expression lethal, you will not leave this building. You ran away once, you won't get a second opportunity. The world outside is too dangerous for a Thorne heir, and you were the one who brought him back into my orbit. I expected that, Elena countered, standing her ground. But I am not your mistress or your concubine. I am the only person who knows how you run your legitimate enterprise and where everybody is buried in the shadows. Elias needs a mother, not a terrified refugee. You need a strategic mind who understands the delicate balance between the Syndicate and the law. She looked pointedly at the tablet screen displaying the legal designation of his office. I will be your senior legal counsel. You will sign the necessary documentation establishing my role, and you will ensure I have a level of access commensurate with that title. I may be a prisoner, Marcus, but I will be a useful one. A slow, calculating smile spread across Marcus's face, a terrible recognition dawning in his eyes. He realized she hadn't returned out of weakness, but out of a desperate, cold calculation. She was trading her freedom not for charity, but for a position of power necessary to ensure Elias's long-term safety. A brilliant negotiation, Elena. I shouldn't be surprised. But know this, every door, every communication, every move you make will be monitored. You are an inmate in a diamond-encrusted cage. He extended a hand toward her, not in greeting, but in finality. Welcome home, Counsel Vance. Let's get Elias well, then we can discuss the terms of your extended confinement. Elena took his hand, the handshake firm, cold, and entirely businesslike. She had traded the fear of being hunted for the terror of being owned. But Elias was alive, and for now, that was the only victory that mattered. She had entered the Citadel, but she was already planning her first act of internal sabotage, the quiet accumulation of power needed to survive her new role as the Thorne Syndicate's gilded prisoner. The war for her son had just begun. Part 2, The Gilded Cage and the Crimson Shadow. Life within the Citadel was a paradox, a maximum security prison disguised as a billionaire's luxury retreat. Elena Vance was housed in a sprawling wing overlooking the Atlantic, complete with dedicated staff, a nursery outfitted with every possible amenity, and a state-of-the-art climate control system designed for Elias's delicate condition. Yet, every electronic device was encrypted and monitored by Marcus's security team, and every human interaction, from the pediatrician's visits to the deliveries of organic produce, was filtered through Hector, the chief of security, whose presence was a silent, constant weight. For the first few weeks, Elias was the epicenter of their world. The Aetheria team, operating with the precision of a Black Ops unit, administered the complex gene therapy. The treatment was aggressive, painful, and required Marcus's complete focus. It was during these intense hours, watching Marcus sit vigil by Elias's specialized environmental crib, that Elena saw the cracks in his titanium facade. He was still the ruthless emperor of the Thorne Syndicate, but when he looked at his son, the control fractured, revealing an absolute, almost fearful devotion. This vulnerability was the first piece of leverage Elena had gained. Her role as senior legal counsel was formalized on Marcus's terms: endless work, zero mobility. She was tasked with auditing the legal fronts of the Syndicate, essentially giving her full, encrypted access to the scale and complexity of his legitimate operations, shipping, real estate development, and global commodity trading. She was swimming in data, forced to map out the intricate flow of wealth that both built his empire and masked his illicit activities. She wasn't just a captive, she was actively reinforcing her own cage, gaining the exact operational knowledge Marcus needed to keep her useful. "You're too efficient, Elena," Marcus commented one evening, leaning against the glass wall of her office, watching the sunset bleed over the ocean. "You're making it too easy for me to justify keeping you here." "I learned efficiency from you, Marcus," she countered, not looking up from a complex interbank transfer audit. "And you value results over sentiment." "I provide results." "Indeed. You provide stability. And that, in my world, is rarer than platinum." The relationship settled into a dangerous professional rhythm. They were partners in crime by proxy, negotiating legal gray areas and strategic vulnerabilities, always revolving around the silent, crucial pivot point of Elias. There was no romance, only mutual, calculated respect, and the implicit understanding that if Elias died or she tried to run again, the consequences would be fatal. The fragile peace shattered on a Thursday afternoon. Elena received an email, carefully routed through an obscure offshore server, from an address she recognized instantly, Anya Petrova. Anya was an old colleague and friend from her pre-Marcus life, a brilliant, cautious legal mind who had quietly helped Elena disappear 2 years ago. The email contained a single, chilling image, a blurry, low-resolution photo of Anya, clearly in distress, tied to a metal chair in a dimly lit, concrete room. Below the image was a short, encrypted message. "Air is in play. Marcus's failure to contain exposure is fatal. We want the North Atlantic logistics keys. Cristo Airport, 48 hours. If Marcus contacts authorities, she dies. If you don't deliver, the Syndicate's books go public." The signature was the stylized, bloody triangle of the Crimson Triad. Elena felt a cold dread that surpassed even the fear of Marcus. Hector Cruz. The name was synonymous with brutal, uncompromising international smuggling, specializing in high-value goods and untraceable black markets. The Triad and the Thorne Syndicate had been locked in a Cold War for years, a simmering feud over territorial rights and several disastrously sabotaged deals. The Triad's intelligence was terrifyingly precise. They knew about Elias, they knew the child's identity was the key vulnerability, and they had struck at Elena's only remaining contact, Anya, to leverage the situation. The threat was not just to Elias, but to the entire legitimate structure of the Thorne Syndicate. Exposure would trigger a global collapse and an immediate, intense response from law enforcement, specifically the FBI, which would be just as dangerous as the Triad's assassins. Elena immediately encrypted the message and marched into Marcus's private command center, a room encased in sound-dampening glass where he ran his empire. "The Crimson Triad," she stated, placing the encrypted tablet on his desk. "They have Anya. And they know about Elias. They want the North Atlantic logistics, NAL, decryption keys within 48 hours." Marcus read the message, his jaw tightening into a knot of fury. "They found him already? Impossible. The Citadel's security protocols are ironclad. Your security is designed to keep external threats out, Marcus, and me in," Elena retorted, her voice sharp with desperation. "It was not designed to contain a secret once I brought it back into your sphere of influence. Any leak, any communication, any medical order for a 2-year-old with a unique genetic marker, the Triad's intelligence network is deep. They track everything. The NAL keys control 40% of their illegal freight movement," Marcus growled, his amber eyes burning. "They know I won't give them up. This is a distraction. A provocation. It's leverage. If you ignore it, they release everything they have on the Syndicate. The offshore ledger details, the political payoffs, and the FBI will be here within the week. If you attack, Anya dies instantly, and they still release the data. This is not a negotiation, Marcus, it's a trap. Marcus stood up, towering over her. The room felt suddenly too small. I will not be extorted by Cruz. I will deploy a surgical response. I will hit their command structure and retrieve Anya. Your surgical response involves bullets and explosions. That is what caused this problem in the first place. Elena whispered fiercely, mindful of the remote microphones. Your power is the threat you pose. Their power is the secret they hold. If you go kinetic, you prove their point and lose Anya and the Syndicate. We need a strategy that removes the threat without revealing our hand. Watching him pace, Elena realized the terrifying truth. Marcus Thorne, with all his armies and billions, was the direct source of the danger, but his nature prevented him from seeing any solution outside of brute force. His protection was a shield with too many holes. To ensure Elias's survival, she had to nullify the biggest threat, the war itself. That night, unable to sleep, Elena made a choice that severed her last ties to legal safety. She used an old, pre-Syndicate burner phone she had smuggled in her heel, a relic from her running days, and initiated an untraceable, triple-encrypted call. The line connected in a sterile, windowless office miles away. "This is Kaine," a voice answered, measured and weary. "Agent Kaine," Elena said, ensuring her voice was modulated and low. "This is the asset code named Nightingale. I have a proposal regarding the Thorne Syndicate and the Crimson Triad." The agent on the other end, Silas Kaine of the FBI, had been patiently mapping the Thorne Syndicate's legal and logistic web for nearly 5 years. He was not a hero, but a pragmatic hunter, and Elena was offering him the biggest prize yet. "Nightingale, I thought you were a myth," Kaine responded, a cynical amusement in his voice. "You've gone from a shadow counsel to a ghost. Why risk exposure now?" "Because the shadows are converging. Marcus's nemesis, Hector Cruz of the Triad, has exposed the Thorne heir." "My son," she confessed, the word feeling raw. "Cruz has kidnapped a former colleague, Anya Petrova, and is threatening to leak Marcus's entire ledger to the public and the Bureau if he doesn't comply with an extortion demand. Marcus is preparing a military strike." Kaine remained silent for a beat. "And you, the ghost, are calling the hunters." "I am offering you Cruz's head and the dismantling of the Triad's North Atlantic infrastructure. I will give you the precise time and location of a critical meeting. Cruz plans to take Marcus out. I will set the stage for you to take out both of them, or at least eliminate Cruz permanently, neutralizing the greatest threat to Elias." "In exchange?" Kaine asked, his voice hardening into a professional edge. "Immunity for myself and legal protection for Elias. But more importantly, I need a guarantee. Marcus Thorne is to be neutralized by the Bureau, not executed by the Triad. He is essential to Elias's survival and future treatment. If the Triad goes down, the remaining Syndicate elements will target Elias for revenge. Marcus needs to survive, imprisoned or contained, to act as a buffer. If you take down Cruz, you must ensure Marcus's survival." Kaine paused, considering the audacity of the woman offering him 2 major criminal organizations on a platter. "Cruz's location is valuable. Thorne's complete logistic network is priceless. The full NAL data. I want the decryption key files from Thorne's safe. They contain the global manifest of every Triad shipment for the last 2 years. Bring me those files, and you have your deal." Elena closed her eyes. The file Kaine demanded was in Marcus's fortified vault, accessible only via Marcus's biometric key and a complex numerical cipher that changed daily. Stealing it was an act of absolute, irrevocable betrayal. It would be her official crossing of the line from self-preservation to treason. "I'll have the data," she promised, her voice chillingly resolute. "Start preparing the ambush, Agent. The clock is ticking." The war was now on two fronts. She was Marcus's counsel, protecting him from the law. She was Kaine's asset, betraying Marcus to the law. And she was Anya's only hope, working in the shadow of the Triad. All for the sake of a 2-year-old child sleeping fitfully a floor above her. Elena knew what she had to do next: access the vault. And only a deep understanding of Marcus Thorne, the man who valued efficiency over all else, would allow her to succeed. Part 3: The Vault and the Double Ambush. The 48-hour deadline imposed by the Crimson Triad was a ticking clock, driving Marcus Thorne into a frenzy of aggressive planning. He disregarded Elena's counsel to negotiate or stall. For Marcus, the only acceptable response was an overwhelming show of force, timed precisely to intersect with the ransom drop-off at Cristo Airport, a high-risk strategy aimed at decapitating Hector Cruz while minimizing collateral damage to his own Syndicate assets. Elena, however, saw the opportunity in his predictable rage. His focus was entirely external, coordinating air support, arranging surveillance sweeps, and mobilizing the heavy assault team. This distraction was exactly what she needed. She had less than 30 hours to acquire the North Atlantic Logistics (NAL) data from Marcus's private vault and relay the coordinates for the double ambush to Agent Kaine. Marcus's vault, located in a sub-level bunker beneath his study, was the heart of the Citadel's security. It was secured by a biometric reader and a cipher. Elena knew the biometric key was Marcus's retinal scan, impossible to fake. But the numerical cipher was the key. Marcus had a personal rule: complexity bred inefficiency, and inefficiency was weakness. Therefore, the daily cipher was always an aggregation of critical, recent, and highly efficient data points. She spent the next 8 hours submerged in Marcus's command center data. She analyzed his routine. The constant, Marcus's security ID, which he used for every internal clearance, never changed: 745-198-2. The variable, the daily cipher, always incorporated a dynamic metric essential to his survival or current objective. The previous day's cipher had been 2,215, the exact millibars of atmospheric pressure at his Miami dock when a major shipment arrived. Today, his focus was solely on the impending confrontation. Elena scanned the mission parameters for the assault team. The deployment was designated for 2:00 hours at the abandoned port of Cristo, the site of the exchange. The critical tactical data point, referenced constantly by Marcus and Hector, was the precise maritime coordinate of the rendezvous zone, chosen for its deep water access and limited sightlines: 25°45' N, 80°10' W. Elena's mind raced, recalling her legal days working on his logistic systems. The NAL vault code wasn't a random number, it was a validation checksum based on the primary variable. Primary variable, the latitude of the drop point, 25°45'. The system required the first 4 digits of the prime latitude, converted to base 16 hexadecimal, and multiplied by the constant factor of Marcus's ID. She quickly performed the calculation on a secure, offline terminal. Latitude, 2545 conversion to hex, 9F9 Marcus's ID constant, to the cipher, 9F9 times 2 equals 19F2. She punched the calculation into the digital lock, 19F2. The digital pad glowed green for a millisecond, then reset, demanding the biometric scan. The calculation was correct, but access was still barred. She realized her mistake. The complexity wasn't in the math, it was in the psychology. Marcus wouldn't use the simple ID multiplier. He would use the emotional multiplier, Elias. Elias was the reason for this entire operation. Elias's date of birth, which Marcus had only recently learned, was April 6, 2023. Marcus would use the day of the week Elias was born, a Sunday, assign the number 7 in his systems, Monday equals 1, Sunday equals 7. Revise cipher calculation, latitude hex times Elias's day factor, 9F9 times 7. 9F9 in decimal is 2553. 2553 times 7 is equal to 17,871. Elena converted the result back to hexadecimal, 45D7. The vault cipher required 4 digits. She realized he would truncate the leading digit. Final attempt at the cipher, 45D7. She waited until 2300 hours. Elias was sleeping soundly, thanks to the Aetheria medication. Marcus was in the war room, preparing for the 2 o'clock deployment. Elena retrieved the burner phone and a tiny, undetectable biometric gel patch she had stolen from a supply cabinet. She found Marcus alone in his dressing room, changing into tactical gear, black carbon armor beneath a tailored coat. "Marcus," she said, her voice laced with concern. "I noticed a discrepancy in the Triad's manifest patterns from 6 months ago. Before you leave, I need you to confirm the location of the encrypted drive containing the full offshore ledger. If something happens to you, the Syndicate needs to ensure a smooth transition, not a collapse." Marcus paused, impressed by her pragmatic foresight, even in the face of his imminent battle. He lowered his guard just enough to look at her. "It's secured in the sub-level vault, in a titanium shell. Only my scan opens it, Elena. Stop worrying about the cleanup. I'm not dying tonight." As he spoke, Elena moved closer, a calculated move that brought her within striking distance. She pretended to adjust his tie. "I know you won't die," she whispered, her hands moving expertly. "But you might be detained." In that moment, she pressed the small, clear gel patch containing the biometric replication formula directly against his temple, where the dermal temperature was highest. The patch instantly activated, and Elena held it there for 10 agonizing seconds, capturing a perfect epidermal copy of his skin cells and sweat signature, enough to bypass the initial skin temperature sensor on the vault door. Marcus looked confused, but the gesture was masked by her seeming concern. "What was that?" "A smudge," she lied easily. "I just needed to confirm you were still human." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand and finished gearing up. Elena retreated, her heart hammering against her ribs, the tiny gel patch now safely secured in a microscopic compartment of the heel of her shoe. At 0:30, the Citadel was eerily quiet, the security team fully focused on the approaching deployment. Elena slipped down to the sub-level. She pressed the gel patch against the biometric scanner. The door chimed, "Biometric pass." She entered the code, 45D7. The vault doors slid open with a deep, hydraulic sigh, revealing a room of cold steel and encrypted servers. She located the required drive, containing the NAL data, a massive trove of information detailing the Triad's routes, payment structures, and operational logistics. She quickly downloaded the file onto a tiny, highly secured flash drive and then resecured the main drive. The door sealed behind her, leaving no trace of her intrusion. At 1 o'clock, with Marcus assembling his assault force, Elena initiated the final phase. She used the burner phone to send the encrypted NAL file to Agent Kaine. She then sent a second, crucial message, the coordinates of the Port of Crystal Rendezvous, 25°45' N, 80°10' and the precise time, 2 o'clock hours. Simultaneously, she drafted a chilling, anonymous text message to the cell phone of Hector Cruz, the Triad's leader, using a deep web disposable service. The message was a direct, false warning: Thorne is sending a full contingent of FBI assets to the Port of Crystal. They are wearing his colors. He plans to hand you over. Her plan was complete. Marcus's plan: engage Cruz at the port at 2 o'clock. Triad's belief: Marcus is setting them up for the FBI. Cruz will arrive planning an immediate, violent preemptive strike on Marcus. FBI's plan, Kaine is informed of the exact coordinates and time. He has the NAL data and is now positioned to ambush both the Thorne Syndicate and the Crimson Triad in the ensuing chaos. Elena's goal, Anya, is released in the confusion. As per Kaine's agreement, Cruz is neutralized by Kaine, and Marcus, the wounded and betrayed, is captured by Kaine's forces, fulfilling the guarantee of his survival. At 1:45, Marcus gave his final command to Hector and stepped into his private helicopter. Elena watched from a surveillance feed, her heart sinking, knowing she had just sent the man she had loved, and now strategically betrayed, into a triple ambush. "He goes to war for his son," she whispered to the empty room. "I go to war to end it." The battle began at exactly 2 o'clock. At the desolate port, as Marcus and his team stepped onto the dock, ready for the face-to-face exchange with Cruz, they were met not by negotiation, but by immediate, heavy machine gun fire from the Triad's hidden positions. Cruz had taken the bait and initiated the preemptive strike. Marcus realized instantly he had been double-crossed. The dock erupted in chaos. Marcus and Hector fought with brutal efficiency, but the Triad's attack was coordinated and overwhelming. Then, just as Marcus's forces were pinned down, a new set of figures emerged from the shadows of the containers, FBI tactical units, led by Agent Kaine, moving with professional silence to surround both warring factions. The double ambush was sprung. Marcus, dodging automatic fire, saw the FBI deploying in a perfectly triangulated formation, cutting off every escape route. The precision was too great. The intelligence was too sharp. He stopped fighting for a fraction of a second, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a trap set by the Triad. This was cooperation. As Marcus turned to signal Hector, a bullet slammed into his shoulder, shattering his armor plating. He fell, stunned, dropping his weapon. The chaos peaked as the Triad, realizing they were also trapped, began firing indiscriminately at the FBI. Elena, who had followed Marcus in a separate, unmarked vehicle, watching the encrypted satellite feed, saw Marcus fall. It was time for her final, most dangerous move. She grabbed a small medical kit, pushed the door open, and ran toward the sound of the gunfire, toward the injured, betrayed man who held the key to her son's life. Part 4, Aftermath and the Strategic Truce. Elena ran onto the docks of the Port of Cristo as if the chaos was a familiar element. The air was thick with the smell of spent gunpowder and salt. The scene was a masterwork of interlocking failure. The Crimson Triad, trapped between Marcus's remaining security forces and the FBI cordon, was dissolving into disarray. Hector Cruz, identified by his distinctive white suit, was already being cuffed by 2 agents. Anya Petrova, her face bruised but alive, was being led to a secure FBI van. She found Marcus where he had fallen, slumped against a stack of wooden pallets, gripping his left shoulder. He was conscious, his face pale and slick with rain, but his amber eyes were still lucid, fixed entirely on her. "The coordinates," he bit out, his voice a strained whisper, blood blooming steadily on his tailored coat. "The Triad knew we were coming. The FBI, they moved too fast, too perfectly. Elena, it was you." It wasn't a question, it was a deduction, born of his acute strategic mind. He realized that the only person with access to his tactical planning and the motive to execute a double cross that benefited neither gang was the mother protecting her child. Elena knelt beside him, ignoring the shouting FBI agents closing in. She didn't deny it. "You were too vulnerable, Marcus. The Triad found Elias through your system. Your way was war. My way was termination." She quickly assessed his wound, applying a trauma dressing from her kit. Just then, Special Agent Silas Kaine appeared, stepping over a discarded assault rifle, his face grimly satisfied. Nightingale, Kaine greeted her, using her asset code. He glanced down at the wounded magnate. You provided the full NAL manifest. Cruz is in custody, and his entire shipping network is now dark. Impressive work, Counsel Vance. Now, step away from the target. Kaine's men moved to secure Marcus, but Elena placed herself firmly between them. Agent Kaine, we had an agreement, she stated, her posture defying his armed agents. Cruz is captured. The Triad's primary logistics are dismantled. I upheld my end. Now, yours. Marcus Thorne is essential to the ongoing treatment of Elias Thorne. Per our arrangement, he is not to be subjected to public arrest or bureau custody. He is to be transferred to a private, non-bureau medical facility where he can continue to authorize and fund the Aetheria treatments. Kaine scoffed. You gave me the key to putting him away for life, and you expect me to hand him a get-out-of-jail-free card. You have the NAL data, Agent. That data will fuel 5 years of prosecutions against every major cartel Cruz ever worked with. You took down the Triad. Do you want the complexity of Thorne's empire, the legal mess, the political fallout, the media circus, or do you want the clean win? He's wounded and contained. Take the win, Agent. He is no longer a threat to the public, and he is my leverage for Elias's survival. That was the deal. Kaine stared at her, recognizing the terrifying logic. She had played him, but she had delivered the prize he wanted most, the neutralization of the Triad. He had no choice but to comply with the letter of their agreement, which he had reluctantly given to secure the NAL data. He lowered his hand slightly. Fine. Get him out of here, Nightingale. But I own his ledger now. And you, Counsel Vance, are on permanent bureau notice. One wrong step and your deal is void. Elena nodded, her victory cold and absolute. Within minutes, Hector and the remaining Syndicate loyalists, who had been waiting in reserve, swept in. Under the cover of the chaotic FBI activity, they loaded the wounded Marcus onto a medical helicopter bound for a private, ultra-secure Aetheria facility. Elena watched the helicopter ascend, the sound drowning out the police sirens. She had saved Marcus from the FBI, but she had done so by ensuring he knew she was the one who put him there. 6 weeks later, Marcus Thorne returned to the Citadel, recovering fully, though a deep scar marked his shoulder. His movement was slow, deliberate, the silence around him more terrifying than any shouting. The final confrontation occurred in his private study, the room where Elena had spent hours dissecting his operations. She stood by the window, waiting. Marcus dismissed Hector, then turned to her. He didn't sit. He simply stood, a dark silhouette against the Miami skyline. You stole my retinal data, bypassed my security, extracted sensitive files, and used them to bring the full force of the US government down on me and my enemy simultaneously, he said, his voice flat, analytical. The Crimson Triad is finished. Cruz is singing. The damage to my infrastructure is minimal, but the psychological message to the remaining Syndicate heads is immense. They now know I have a weakness, a son, and a wife capable of using the FBI as a scalpel. Elena met his gaze. Elias is stable. Anya is free. The greatest existential threat to our family, the Triad, is gone. Your unilateral war plan would have cost us everything, Marcus. I traded the NAL files for your life and Elias's security. It was the most efficient outcome. He took a slow step forward, studying her not with anger, but with a profound, calculating curiosity. You betrayed my trust in the most intimate way possible, by compromising the Citadel. Yet, your strategy was flawless. It was merciless. You used the law against the criminal, and you used the criminal against the law. You achieved in one night what my entire war machine couldn't. He paused, a flicker of something she hadn't seen before, a strange blend of awe and pragmatic recognition in his eyes. I realized something on that dock, Elena. My weakness was not Elias. My weakness was the belief that I could control my world alone. That I could protect my heir through brute force isolation. You proved that my survival requires a partner who understands both the rules of the civilized world and the rules of the shadows, and is willing to break them all for the final result. He walked toward his desk, retrieved a document, and slid it across the polished mahogany. It was a partnership agreement for the Thorne Syndicate. I was going to keep you as a prisoner, Elena. Now, I need you as an equal. You will be my partner in business and strategy. Your job is to scrub the Syndicate clean, to solidify the legal operations, and ensure that what remains is not merely powerful, but impenetrable to agencies like Kaine's. Our future is secured not by separation, but by absolute, cooperative power. He looked up, a faint, chilling smile touching his lips. I won't try to control you anymore, Counsel. I'll simply ensure our interests are perfectly aligned. We are both Thorne. And we will ensure our son inherits a fortress, not a war zone. Elena picked up the pen. The gilded cage was now a throne, secured by betrayal and necessity. She signed the document, sealing their dangerous truce. Their survival now depended on their unholy alliance. Part 5, The Unholy Union. 6 months passed with a chilling, clinical efficiency. The Thorne Syndicate, previously a vast, sprawling organism of legitimate and illegitimate entities, underwent a ruthless restructuring. Elena Vance, now Marcus Thorne's co-chair of strategy and legal oversight, didn't merely cleanse the books, she surgically excised the diseased tissue. She sold off entire subsidiaries tied to obvious money laundering, dissolved offshore trusts deemed too risky, and routed the core wealth through legitimate, impenetrable investment vehicles. It was a rapid, painful transformation, but it was effective. The illegal profits shrank, but the legal fortress around the remaining empire grew vast and unassailable. The Citadel was no longer just Marcus's fortress, it was their shared command center. Elena moved out of her segregated wing and into the main master suite, a symbolic and strategic move. Their relationship was not one of affection, but of dangerous, intellectual synchronization. They debated logistics, risk models, and asset protection late into the night, their conversations sharp and charged with a mutual respect earned through high treason and shared survival. They had found common ground in the most ruthless of marketplaces, efficiency and the absolute defense of their legacy. Elias was the living proof of their alliance. His Aetheria treatments were a success, the rare syndrome was in remission, and the boy thrived under the protective watch of two of the most cunning minds in the country. He became the quiet, innocent center of their heavily guarded world, his laughter the only sound that could truly disarm the tension that hung perpetually in the air. Special Agent Silas Kaine, meanwhile, had found Elena's terms to be brutally effective. The NAL data provided a roadmap to dozens of international criminals, and the collapse of the Crimson Triad allowed the FBI to claim a massive victory. Kaine remained a shadow, watching Elena from afar, fully aware that she was a greater asset outside of prison than inside. Her immunity was a chain binding her to a delicate balance. She had to remain legitimate enough to avoid prosecution, but powerful enough to manage Marcus's residual risk. The culmination of their new partnership came on a humid Miami evening. Elena and Marcus stood on the penthouse terrace, overlooking the city lights. They weren't celebrating a business victory, but something far more intimate and strategic. The board is finalized, Marcus noted, holding a glass of amber liquid. Every external risk is mitigated. The legal entity is a monument to compliance. And a labyrinth of shell companies, Elena finished, dryly. But yes, it's the safest path forward. For Elias. Marcus turned to her. When you stood on those docks, Elena, you didn't just betray me. You claimed the right to determine our future. You made me understand that my power was meaningless if it couldn't secure the one thing I value. He reached into his inner coat pocket and retrieved a small, velvet box. It contained a ring, not the massive, ostentatious diamond she had discarded 2 years prior, but a sleek, custom-designed band of black titanium, stark and modern. This isn't romance, Elena, he stated, his amber eyes unwavering. This is the contract. A final, public declaration to the world, to the Bureau, to the surviving Syndicate, to any future threat, that you and I are indivisible. We are the architects of this new system. We are marrying strategy, not love. Elena looked at the ring, then at Marcus. It was the only honest proposal he had ever given her. It wasn't about possession, it was about shared dominion. It was the ultimate statement of absolute, cooperative power. The terms are acceptable, Marcus, she replied, accepting the box. The greatest security for Elias is not a hiding place, but unchallengeable authority. They remarried in a private, heavily vetted ceremony at the Citadel. Elena Vance Thorne was no longer the former spouse or the prisoner, she was the indispensable partner, the strategic mind that ensured the Empire's continuity. The story ends 6 months after their remarriage. Elias, now 3, is drawing with crayons on the Italian marble